Assessment at Key Stage 3 at Valentine's is changing. The old system used to mean that students were graded from 1 to 9. So that's very similar. If anyone in here has a child who's been through their GCSEs already, it's exactly the same numerical model. It means that a child would leave here with a grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right up to 9, based on how they're performing. And the old Key Stage 3 assessment model meant that as students progressed through Year 7 into Year 8 and into Year 9, they would end up with a numerical grade. We are changing that. This year we will be introducing something called progression thresholds. I'll talk you through why that is in a moment. But you'll see up on the board, they're colour-coded, and they start at foundation level, move to developing, secure, advanced, and then exceptional. So why have we decided to change this? Last year we spent quite a lot of time looking at the Key Stage 3 data, looking at the experience of the students in Key Stage 3. And we realised quite quickly that things needed improving, they needed changing, they needed adapting. And actually quite a lot of schools have already moved to a model like this. The idea is that we focus much more on developing the core skills within the subject. Rather than being transfixed on a number, the student trying to achieve a number to get a good grade, we're shifting away from that. And the focus will be on developing the core skills in each subject that they study. It's also to provide them with really a good high quality foundation for further study in the build-up to their GCSE subjects. And just remember, Key Stage 3, Year 7 to 9, by the time they finish Year 9, we're really expecting them to have some core knowledge and skills ready to move on to their GCSEs in Year 10. The next thing I want us to consider is how it's actually going to impact on your child, because these changes will be quite significant for them. First and foremost, their target will now be based on one of these progression thresholds rather than a number. So you'll be used to seeing a report that says my child should be achieving a grade 5. It's no longer going to say that. It will state one of these 5 thresholds. They'll be assessed against a skill set. So rather than, for example, a teacher sitting down and giving them an exam question to answer, which is usually common practice across lots of schools, that might happen, but that's not the only way they will achieve this progression threshold. They are being assessed against the skill set within that subject that can be shown and demonstrated across lots of different types of assessment. It can be monitored throughout the course as well. And of course, finally, and this is the big thing for you probably as parents, the reports that get sent home to you are going to look different. Okay, very similar format, but all of a sudden there's going to be different colours, different thresholds. They will look different to what you are used to seeing. So here are our 5 level thresholds. Each of them has a descriptor which shows, and these are in your handout, which shows how your child is doing. And this is a really basic idea of the threshold. I'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute. But as you can see, things get progressively harder as a student moves up the progress level threshold. There's a couple of things I want to focus on here. You'll see the very last part of each descriptor. It says knowledge and skills delivered in this phase of the curriculum. And that's really important because the phase of the curriculum evolves, it changes, and things become more challenging. What they do in term 1 in Year 8 becomes more challenging in term 2. That then becomes more challenging in term 3. Likewise, when they go from Year 8 to 9, the skill set that they are using, developing, the knowledge that they're developing gets progressively harder as they move not only through the year groups, but also through the study of that course as well, through the terms, as they move through term 1, through term 2, through term 3. As the curriculum progresses on, things will become more challenging for them. And you can see the difference between the different thresholds. begun to explore and retain limited information, developing an understanding, a secure understanding, a strong understanding, and then being able to master that understanding. So that's all very important, but what does it look like in each subject? Now on our website, as of tomorrow, I'm meeting with our website lead tomorrow morning to make sure it's all put in the right place. You'll see a tab on our website which is curriculum. Within that there's a tab called assessment, and for each Key Stage 3 subject there is something called a progress map, and it looks like this. Again, there's a version of this, a copy of this in the handout. You can see up on the board lots of information, but this shows you, this is an example in language, that in language we call them the signifiers of success, but the skills that they are being assessed against can be found up here. There's 3 strands in languages: listening and reading, writing and speaking. And I think what's really important to note from this is not the huge amount of detail in there. This is how teachers will assess your child. But you'll see how from year 7, the first column here, to year 8, the second column, and year 9, the third column, each strand gets progressively harder as they move across Key Stage 3. So for example, advanced in year 7 becomes a lot more challenging to achieve advanced again in year 8, and it becomes more challenging again to achieve advanced in year 9. And that's the same across all of the threshold strands. I think, and I hope this is the most important question you'll want to know when you leave here today, is how will you know, based on this new assessment system, that your child is doing well? And I understand why this is such an important question for parents, because when they get to year 10, the end of Key Stage 3 and into year 10, it all comes down to GCSEs and the grades they will leave with at the end of year 11. So I've mapped this out to try and show you what it might look like. You can see from this table here, we have our primary thresholds. These thresholds come from Key Stage 2 levels. So when students sit SATs in Key Stage 2, they come to us and we have a certain amount of data on them. We then carry out some tests ourselves. Sometimes we carry out CATS tests. We also have tests within some subjects additionally, for example, practical-based subjects. And we then are able to decide which threshold a child would fall into. That then, in turn, would show us what they might achieve at GCSE. And of course, there's a range, and of course, it can vary. But the target here, this threshold target that your child then has, should give you an indication of what they might achieve at GCSE. So let's see what this might look like. Let's imagine we've got a child who comes into us from Key Stage 2 and their threshold at Key Stage 2, their primary threshold, is greater depth. You can see that here, second from the top. And we'll say, for argument's sake, that their Key Stage 2 level is 110. That actually puts them above national average. At Key Stage 2, 100 is national average. Anything above that is above national average, anything below that is below. So this student with 110 is at greater depth, they're above national average. So therefore, their target threshold would be advanced. We would expect to see them working at advanced when they come into us. And there's one of 3 things that can happen, and I'm just giving you the scenarios of how this might look. Let's just say that throughout year 7, 8 and 9, they get to the end of year 9 and they are secure. That means that they would be below target, because remember, their threshold target is advanced, and you'll see here, this example I've given, they've dropped down to secure. On the report that you received from them, if that was the case, their grade would be red, their report would show red, and they might not, but they might come out with GCSE grades of around 4 to 5. Let's just say then that this individual stayed on target, that throughout year 7, 8 and 9, they were working at advanced continuously. They may then get GCSE grades of 6 to 7, and that would represent them achieving their target grades. Now I want to come back to that point I said earlier on, because it is really important. You wouldn't expect a student to come in to be advanced to all of a sudden surpass that target. Remember, things get progressively more difficult based on the thresholds. So therefore, if this young person came in and was advanced throughout year 7, throughout year 8 and throughout year 9, that represents really good positive progress. And that's a message I really hope people do take away from today. That will represent really good progress. Because remember, the skill set gets more difficult and becomes more challenging. Of course, we could end up with a scenario, and this does happen, where the target threshold would be advanced and they surpass that target. On the report, that would be shown as blue. And this student perhaps could be exceptional, so they've gone above their advanced target, and typically they would be the students that leave with 8s and 9s at GCSE. I think it's also important to remember I'm showing you here a scenario at the end of year 9. You've also got assessment points that happen throughout year 7 and throughout year 8. So you are likely to see a report that has got a little bit of red on it, quite a lot of green, and the occasional blue. That's possible. You might get one that's all green, but you're likely to see a variation of colours because it's not always going to be stable at any given time. But what this, if you do get a chance to look at the policy, it is obviously quite long because policies are, but you'll see how this is really going to help us as a school to improve the quality of what's happening at Key Stage 3. Because we have a really good idea and a good understanding of how many students in our school should be getting an 8 and 9. Because we know what they get at GCSE. We also know how many students usually get a 4 and a 5. So we can start then look at this assessment data at Key Stage 3 and see that it's matching up, to see that it looks similar. And where it doesn't, we can act on that. We can go back to departments, we can work with them, we can support them, we can make sure that the target setting and then the grades that your child is achieving are far more accurate.